Radio. Looks like I'm disconnected here again. Hang on. Oh, shoot. Hi, everybody. Host disconnected. Let's see here. Something's going on. Says host is disconnected. I'm not disconnected. I'm right here. And I think I'm at least broadcasting for YouTube. Alright, hang on.
Press 1 to hear important
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we're
Alright, hey, what do you know? I'm back on the air.
You're calling back into a live show. We are reconnecting you now.
Alright, looks like I'm connected to Blog Talk Radio. This is Daniel Gray. I am the Trailer Park Prophet. Coming at you live from beautiful downtown Crestone, Colorado on Blog Talk Radio. Again, my name is Daniel Gray. I'm the Trailer Park Prophet. This is Loco Friday. Welcome aboard. We got rain here in Crestone, Colorado. I mean, we are totally socked in getting a major rainstorm. I just took my friend Bruce all the way to Antonito to buy some special grass alfalfa hay. I guess it was oats. It had oats in it. Oats and alfalfa and regular hay. And we went down to Antonito, which is about 100 miles. And it was raining all the way. And remember, I live in Colorado in the San Luis Valley. And the San Luis Valley is considered a high mountain desert, basically, is what it is. Or at least a high mountain valley. I guess you can't consider it a desert, but it's, you know, right in that category in the range of desert. But at any rate, it was raining and beautiful, and people aren't used to a lot of rain, not down here in the San Luis Valley, so the roads are a little slick, but everything's greening up and looking really good. And of course, if you're from Colorado, you're just so grateful to have any rain. Looks like there's a problem with Blog Talk Radio. So I think probably what I'm going to do is try to continue one more time. You know, I can't seem to get in here. And I think probably the troubles I'm having with Blog Talk right now is I'm going off a wireless connection. And that's a little tougher to accomplish. But I'm gonna try one more time here. I guess I could try to go through. Now let's see if I can get in there by Skype. That's a good idea. Maybe I'll try Skype. I don't know, I've had my difficulties. And it's all me. Okay, go ahead. Yes. We want to Skype our way to Blog Talk Radio. And this may or may not work. I imagine the weather has something to do with the connection, but I might be totally wrong.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
I just kind of like the idea of being in on Blog Talk and seeing if I can get my show recorded there. And also, the good thing about Blog Talk is my show it's always archived. And that's kind of cool, so that somebody can stumble onto my name and look in there and go, oh, look, Trailer Park Prophet. Alright, you know, this is citizen journalist Daniel Gray, and I'm not always the slickest turd in the punch bowl. That's a disgusting reference. Alright, let's see here. Everyone's talking about this unfortunate beheading of journalist James Foley. The world is on fire with this story. And we actually do have the transcript from the last email that ISIS, this radical Islamic group in Syria and Iraq, they beheaded this guy. We talked about it, journalist James Foley. And they sent James Foley's parents an email after they killed him, or right before they killed him. And I'm going to read this to you to give you an idea about who ISIS is, what radical Islam is all about. Which, by the way, in the news now, they're saying that Al-Qaeda has made mention that they'd like to partner up with ISIS, or ISI, or whatever they're calling themselves now. I think the best thing is to call them IS, which is Islamic State. I mean, they're vacillating on what they want to be called, these savages. Yeah, like right here it says ISIS executioners, so they want to be called IS, which is the Islamic State. And again, they're controlling part of Syria and Iraq, and they beheaded this James Foley. And his parents have been talking about it, about how savage it is and how it affects them. I mean, you should see his dad and mom, particularly his mom. His mom she just looks worked. Alright, we're going to have to get out of here. Alright, Blog Talk, we're just going to continue rolling here, and we'll have to just get back.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
Oh no, I'm back on again. Oh my God. Well, you know, if they do call in, if we do get somebody to call in, I actually just shut off Blog Talk. I don't even know. Okay, let's get to this email though. At any rate, these Foleys, their dad and mom, John Foley, I don't know what the mother's name is. I mean, they've been living this holy hell for the last 2 years since ISIS has got their son in captivity. Can you imagine having one of your siblings or your husband or wife being held in a Islamic jail with a bunch of jihadis? How crazy that would be. And, man, you know, these people are just putting up with it. But, you know, just to give you an idea, here's this email. And there's a lot in here. So, again, this is an email that the Foleys got from ISIS, the Islamic State, the people that just cut his head off on Tuesday. This is the final email from the Islamic State militants to the parents of James Foley. Now, they've been communicating kind of sporadically over the last 2 years, but the last time the Foleys had heard from ISIS was in December. So this is the first they've heard of him in 7-8 months. This is after he was killed. All right, so then they get this email from ISIS, Islamic State. How long will the sheep follow the blind shepherd? A message to the American government and their sheep-like citizens. We have left you alone since you disgraced your disgraceful defeat in Iraq. We did not interfere in your country or attack your citizens while you were safe in their homes, despite our capacity to do so. As for the scum of your society who are held prisoner by us, they dared to enter the lion's den and were eaten. We were given many chances to negotiate, meaning the United States, to negotiate the release of your people via cash transactions, as other governments have accepted. We have also offered prisoner exchanges to free the Muslims currently in your detention, like our sister. Now, I never heard of this woman, Dr. Afia Sidquidi. I need to look that up. However, you proved very quickly to us that this is not what you are interested in. We have no motivation to deal with the Muslims except with the language of force. Oh, you have no motivation to deal with the Muslims except with the language of force, a language you were given in Arabic translation when you attempted to occupy the land of Iraq. Now you return to bomb the Muslims of Iraq once again, this time resorting to aerial attacks and proxy armies, all the while cowardly shying away from a face-to-face confrontation. Now see, this is giving us some information. They're saying proxy armies. I wonder if they're talking about the Kurds, or I wonder if we actually do have mercenaries in there. I bet we have both. And saying that we're avoiding a face-to-face confrontation, well, that's Obama's foreign policy right there. Goes on to say, this is the Islamic State leader. Today our swords are unsheathed towards you, capital letters, government and citizens alike, and we will not stop until we quench our thirst for your blood. All written in caps. Now that's rather barbaric. Can you imagine some Christian saying that? I got 3 unread messages. Alright, it goes on to say, You do not spare the weak, elderly, women, or children, so we will not spare yours. And I think what he's talking about there is how the drone strikes have taken out terrorists, mainly in Afghanistan and Pakistan. But I think he's talking about the drones. It says, you do not spare our weak, elderly, women, or children. We will not spare yours. You and your citizens will pay the price of your bombings, the first of which being the blood of American citizen James Foley. We will be executed, he will be executed as a direct result of your transgressions towards us. And the guy that was cutting James Foley's head off on Tuesday actually had a British accent. So that kind of adds a little more impetus to the fire of people out there that are saying that there are a lot of terrorists from the Middle East and from Europe who have passports that can get them into the U.S. That's basically what that's all about. All right. Oh, this is kind of floating around the internet, and this is from Peter Johnson Jr. He's a mouthpiece, legal eagle expert for Fox, but he's saying that the government agency says that the government broke the law with the Bergdahl swap for the prisoners, the terrorists in Guantanamo. And he begs the question, is this just another sign the administration is overreaching? Give me your thoughts. You know, but I'll give you my thoughts, Peter Johnson Jr. Yeah, I think it was illegal. And if it wasn't illegal, it was definitely against our policy to pay ransom to terrorists. And as a matter of fact, the ISIS, the Islamic State, tried to extort $100 million from James Foley's parents. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he broke the law. I don't know, does he actually cite the law here? I wonder if we might even have a video. I mean, it could be in the law of the United States. It says that the president or any of his agents or agencies under his preview will negotiate with terrorists, or will pay a ransom to terrorists. I don't know. Let's see what we got here. Oh, here we go. Nonpartisan government watchdog agency said Thursday that the Pentagon broke the law when it swapped 5 Taliban leaders for Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl earlier this year. The Government Accountability Office, that's the IGs, the Inspector Generals, in a legal opinion issued by the request from the congressional lawmakers, said the Defense Department violated the law by failing to notify key Capitol Hill committees by at least 30 days in advance. They didn't do that. Further, the report said the Pentagon broke another law by using funds that were not technically available. Where did that money go? Defense Department Press Secretary Rear Admiral John Kirby told Fox News Thursday night the operation to retrieve Sergeant Bergdahl was lawfully conducted, and it was also the judgment of the Justice Department. Nothing has changed about our view that this was a lawful recovery. Well, no, of course not. But
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show,
now I'm getting back into blog. How funny. The GAO, which is the Government Accounting Office, said the law in this case, quote, is clear and unambiguous. The agency said that while the Defense Department defended the legality of the controversial swap, in our view, the DOD, that's the Department of Defense, was dismissed or has dismissed the significance of the exchange or the express language in the law. So, and then there's more to this story. So maybe it was against the law, and Congress should have known that without having to go to another government agency. But I don't know, man. But at this point, you know, there's so much crooked stuff going on with the Obama administration that this is actually small beans. I mean, this would be enough to get a Republican impeached, but for this president, this lawless president, Barack Hussein Obama, basically we're operating under anarchy. Remember that cop? Remember that cop? He said to this guy, I don't have to follow the law. Barack Obama doesn't follow the law, so why should I have to follow the law? A cop said that. I mean, he was animal control, but geez. You wonder how many other bureaucrats feel the same way. Oh yeah, hey, this was rather stunning. Remember we were talking about how, I gotta look at these, make sure there's nothing terrible going on. Remember how we were talking about, okay, good, take my time. Alright, we were talking about how Obama was said something about ISIS, Islamic State, about how they were a JV team. And I remember him saying that, actually. That was in January. Obama thought ISIS was a JV team. Now they're a threat beyond anything we've seen. That was the line that came from...
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
And that came from our... who is it? The head of the defense. He's saying now that ISIS is bigger than anything we've ever seen. I wonder if this is the quote right here. Chuck Hagel. Yeah, Chuck Hagel. He is our Secretary of Defense, who allegedly, the rumors out there, Chuck Hagel actually converted to Islam back in January. I mean, even if it's not a true story, it's one hell of a fictional story to suggest that United States of America is headed up by a defense secretary who is Islamic. Now, that is one hell of a story. I mean, just to make that up if it's not true. What if it is true? And if it isn't true, who would want to put that kind of disinformation out there? Okay, so in an interview with the New Yorker, Obama was asked about these various rebel factions. His response was a mishmash of non-interventionistic rhetoric and naive, flippant dismissal. I'd like to read this. This is probably really good to read. But I want to get the Hegel quote. Oh, here we go. Here's Hegel. We have a video too. We'll just listen to the video. Here's Chuck Hagel on CNN. I think this was this weekend, talking about how now we have a problem like we've never seen before. And we reported here that there's a lot of money in IS, the Islamic State. A lot of money. Like a hell of a lot more than Al-Qaeda had. That kind of money. Billions of dollars. And they're very openly are at war with the U.S. That's the other thing that the press was talking about. People are really, they're disgusted, they're angry, they're confused. There's a lot of people out there that say that the beheading of James Foley is not that big of a deal, doesn't happen that much. But regardless, a lot of people are out there buzzing about what's going on in Iraq and Syria. So Al-Qaeda is not on the run. Radical Islam is not on the run. And then again, you couple that with a story I read that Al-Qaeda is joining forces with IS. That's a scary scenario. So here's Chuck Hagel. I believe this was, well, I'm not sure when this was. This might have been yesterday, actually.
ISIL is as sophisticated and well-funded as any group that we have seen. They're beyond just a terrorist group. They marry ideology, a sophistication of strategic and tactical military prowess. They are tremendously well funded. Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen. So we must prepare for everything when we look at what they did to Mr. Foley, what they threatened to do to all Americans and Europeans, what they are doing now. I don't know any other way to describe it other than barbaric. They have no standard of decency, of responsible human behavior, and I think the record's pretty clear on that. So yes, they are an imminent threat to every interest we have, whether it's in Iraq or anywhere else. But we are working with international partners. We're working closely with Peshmerga and the ISF. We are doing everything we can within the confines of our influence to assist and recognize, as we said, to deal with ISIL there in the Middle East, and also recognizing that it is a threat, just as we've all said.
But I smell a rat. My first impulse was to say that these guys got totally caught off guard, flat-footed. And then I listened to this speech, and I wonder if maybe the calculus in the Obama administration is, okay, we need to kick some Muslim ass. We need to show the world, and particularly the American voter, that we're not in bed with Islam, and we can take out these monsters because they don't have the support of the greater Arab community, which is interesting in and of itself. Turkey supports ISIS, and so does, I believe, Saudi Arabia. Interesting mix of bedfellows in the Middle East. But, I wonder if the Obama administration is looking at this as an opportunity to look tough, be against radical Islam, be out there saying, you know, they don't, ISIS doesn't represent the majority of Muslims out there, you know, be able to use this for spin, you know, to get your message out there that most Muslims are moderate. Yeah, you know, misinformation, psychological warfare. I don't trust this administration as far as I could drop kick it. You know, and that would be, you know, and see, here's something you got to remember too, the way that the Saudi Arabians operate in the Middle East. They give money to every single terrorist group, every single one. That way, if something goes down, that they need to get in touch with them and they need some influence with this radical Islamic group, even if they're Sunnis or Shiites, the Saudi Arabians, they got a little funnel of money going to them, because there's a lot of cases in the Middle East that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and they may need to, you know, they may need some mercenaries, they may need some hired guns, they might need some muscle, and, you know, what better way than to call people you already have a relationship with and just pay them to go jump in on, you know, in this war on that side. That's how Saudi Arabia works. And people in the Middle East are always changing sides and alliances, and it could be along religious lines, generally between the Sunnis and the Shiites, or it could be down tribal lines, or it could be scores being settled from past conflicts. I always question people's motivation. Oh, here is President Obama on Tuesday. A lot of people are talking about this. You know, we did the report on the speech Obama gave on Wednesday, I guess it was. Yeah, on Hump Day with the Prophet. In case you didn't know, the president interrupted his vacation at Martha's Vineyard to address the situation with James Foley. And I mentioned at the time, and I've heard it now all over the internet and on the news, that a lot of people felt like I did, that President Obama, he didn't seem very inspired given that speech about James Foley losing his head. There was no passion. It was very even-keeled, and it didn't really say what we were going to do. I mean, in general terms, but not the kind of way I would have liked to have heard it. I mean, the president was not angry. He didn't seem defiant. He wasn't trying to marshal the forces. In my mind, it sounded like a speech he knew he had to give, and his heart wasn't in it. But right after that, he goes and plays golf. I guess he walked right out of the impromptu press room talking about James Foley losing his head and walked right onto the first green. I think it was with Alfonso Mourning. But what a, you know, and I mean, I don't mean to be small, but I don't think this president cares. Everybody's talking about how that was insensitive, and I guess the president did call Foley's parents, which, you know, was nice. It would have been nicer if he went and saw them. But it's a bad visual, but I don't think this president really cares. I mean, he knows now he's a lame duck. They're probably going to lose the Senate to the Republicans, and he doesn't really care what the public thinks. He's going to have a life. They can have their life. He'll have his life, and he's, you know, smart enough to be able to handle anything, anywhere, including on a golf course. But here he is. Let's see what this video has. This is from NBC News. Okay, listen. Let's start over here.
Increasing pressure on the president, who adopted a defiant tone yesterday.
The United States of America will continue to do what we must do to protect our people.
But after those remarks, Mr. Obama went back.
Ah, shit. Hang on.
The White House continues to rule out boots on the ground.
Alright, I screwed this up. Let's go again.
Increasing pressure on the president, who adopted a defiant tone yesterday.
The United States of America will continue to do what we must do to protect our people.
But after those remarks, Mr. Obama went back to trying to balance vacation with work, even as some critics questioned whether he should have cut his vacation short. And while the White House continues to rule out boots on the ground, the State Department wants 300 more security personnel in Baghdad, and airstrikes against ISIS were increased after Foley was killed.
300 more boots on the ground? I mean, that's like 900 that we know of that Obama's stuck into Iraq since this whole thing started to escalate. So he wants 300 more advisors. So we know there's at least 1,000 people there, and there's probably 10,000 Americans right now in Iraq. That's my guess. That'd be a good number to know. So we learned that, and I don't know, what do you think? Does it bug you that the president could be able to shift gears like that? I mean, it really doesn't bother me, to tell you the truth. I mean, I have a lot more important things to be bothered by. It's a bad visual, man. If I was advising Obama, or if I was Obama, I would have said, no way am I walking out of the press room to a golf game. Let's have a security meeting afterwards. God, you know, he could have played golf first thing in the morning the next day or something. It does seem insensitive. All right, Benjamin Franklin said, it is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. Amen. And when I decided to talk about this, I'm thinking, you know, that starts at the local level. I mean, all politics is local. This is Local Friday, and, you know, I'm amazed, you know, coming back to Crestone and watching people and how they align themselves with the power, and how the power is basically doled out like bricks of cheese to people. And, you know, what better way to make people beholden to you than to give them a job, particularly in a bad economy in a small town. You know, and I was listening to, I kept meaning to bring this up. I was listening to a program on NPR, and they were talking about a new program for hungry kids, and they can go and have lunch or breakfast at the library during the summer. And I'm thinking, libraries are obsolete already, and they're trying to turn them into these social centers. In Gunnison, a town of 6,000, they were talking about building a brand new library. They already got the land, and it's going to have a coffee house and a little theater, and it's basically where the government hands out their propaganda and hands out their bricks of cheese and gives their little awards. And you know, when the government is involved with celebrations, you know, things are basically out of control. The government is in places it shouldn't be, and that's statism. You know, whether it's Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua handing out rice and beans to people that join his party, the Sandinistans, and giving the neighborhood leaders those preferential government jobs. I mean, it's all the same. Same thing here in Crestone. You know, you want to go to the food bank. It's in the municipal building. The government controls more and more, and even in this little creepy town, the government's involved with the energy fair and the deal at the beginning of August, the music festival. I mean, the government is involved in everything. The town government, the school government, everybody's giving money to this festival and getting their PR on the posters and advertisements and everything, but it's disgusting. Government shouldn't have anything to do with celebrations except for giving them the permit and telling them what they expect of them. volunteers. Everybody's getting paid. You know, and I love it here in Crestone because all you got to do to watch somebody froth at the mouth is to bring up corporations and they're, you know, blah, 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 blah. Corporations aren't people. You know, I mean, you can just, it's so predictable what's going to come out of their little lame little mouths. But then here, the music festival that I was just talking about, it's a goddamn corporation. And the reason it's a corporation is because some Democratic trial lawyer would be willing to take a case from somebody who got hurt at the festival. Limited liability. That's why people get into corporations. And 95% of the money that the trial lawyers give to political campaigns are Democrats. That's why there's no tort reform in Obamacare. And you're an idiot if you are not incorporated. Because if you're not incorporated, you could lose your house. You could get a lien against future earnings. God. All right, here's a story. I don't know what's going on here. We got a story here from Congressman Alan West. Man, he's getting fired up. And he says here, nightmare on the border, ISIS and Mexican cartels teaming up. We've been talking about this. You know, people have been talking about this for the last 20 years, believe it or not. And this is an article written by Alan West today. And we're going to get into this a little bit. He says, last week, Texas Governor Rick Perry said it is highly likely ISIS is already in the United States, crossing over our unsecured southern border. He's not the only one. As reported by Breitbart, former CIA covert operations officer Michael Baker said that he believes that there is, quote, a lot of communication between ISIS and the Mexican drug cartels, given past efforts by Al-Qaeda to do otherwise on Thursday's Laura Ingraham show. We might even have a video. He says here, he goes, we've had good intel over the years about Al-Qaeda, about their efforts to coordinate with, as an example, Mexican cartels in an effort to try to exploit our southern borders. He reported, adding that a terrorist group like ISIS absolutely knows about the lack of security on the border. This is nothing new, as we already have some instances of terrorists being aided and abetted by Mexican drug cartels, which Governor Rick Perry more aptly described as narco-terrorists. Don't forget that 2 planned attacks were foiled targeting our nation's capital, one against the ambassador of Saudi Arabia and Israel, the other a Capitol Hill terrorist attack. In both cases, terrorists aligned with Al-Qaeda or Iran received support from narco-terrorists. So, yeah, hello, I forgot all about this. They're already operational in the United States. ISIS has a large financing stream with assets reportedly nearly $2 billion. We've got that same number from other sources. The narco-terrorists will provide safe passage for anyone across our porous border for a price. Of course. This is another reason why the GOP needs to must win the majority in the Senate so current majority leader Harry Reid can be dismissed. After all, it was Reid who openly stated that our southern border is secure. Alright, I guess that's about all we need to talk about there. A good article, you might want to read the rest of it. It's on my Facebook page if you so desire. And I got a bad feeling about 9/11, September 11 this year. I hope I'm wrong. Here's a quote from Walter E. Williams, black man, black conservative. He says, prior to capitalism, the way people amassed great wealth was by looting, plundering, and enslaving their fellow man. Capitalism made it possible to become wealthy by serving your fellow man. You know, you find a product, you sell it for the highest price you can get, the person served by the product, and you got money. I mean, it is true. It's absolutely positively true. But I got a little argument here that you can use out there when you're talking to people. You know how people, the progressive socialist statists will say that, you know, what a rotten place America is, and how rotten capitalism is, and how rotten corporations are. This line is, I kind of took an old line and I reworked it a little bit. You might remember Winston Churchill said once that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the rest. And so you can turn that around and say, well, you know, capitalism is the worst form of economics except for all the rest. And I think for the low information voters, it might work on them. And it might not. You know, I've seen a lot of this from different postings that, you know, I read on the internet about how Nazi Germany and the Weimar Republic, during the time of the Weimar Republic, that they actually registered guns, and then when it came time to take over Germany, because they had those gun registrations and their people's addresses, the Nazis, the brown shirts, just went to the address and picked up the guns. And that's a downside to having registration. And it says here, starting in 1933, the data collected by the Weimar gun control law were used by the Nazis to disarm the Jews. Their eligibility was denied, their permits were revoked, their homes were searched, and their weapons were seized. And if it could happen in Germany, it could probably happen here. You know, and that's the whole idea of the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, is that you have a constitutional right to have a weapon to defend yourself. And the government shall not invoke any law that hinges on that basic freedom. My dog's best friend is out front. It's raining, man. I'm telling you, it's raining in Crestone, Colorado. Okay, this story here is kind of interesting. The Daily Signal, paycheck for terrorism. $5,300 for suicide attack. Now, these stories, I've seen a bunch of these. Now, this is from the Daily Signal, which I think is a pretty good blog. Article written here by Sherry Atkinson. It says, for the first time, startling details are being made public about the millions of dollars funneled from the Middle East charities to Islamic terrorists and their families. The money was used to reward terrorists.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
Hi everybody, I'm back. Trailer Park Prophet. That's blog, they're back now. And we're talking about an article here in the Daily Signal about people in various Islamic countries are getting a big check from the U.S. government, and it's going to the families of terrorists. It says here the money was used to reward terrorists and their families after attacks on Israelis and U.S. nationals visiting Israel between 2000 and 2005 during the Second Intifada, or Palestinian uprising. The evidence was presented today in a landmark case in New York federal court 300 U.S. nationals claim Air Bank knowing provided financial services to terrorists and their financiers in violation of the U.S. anti-terrorism law. Air Bank contends it did not knowingly serve terrorists. Millions of dollars were funneled from the Middle East charities to Islamic terrorists. It says that the bank documents reveal an elaborate system from which Amman, Jordan-based Arab Bank served as a center point. Some Israelis refer to the bank as the Grand Central Station of terrorist financing. For example, bank documents allegedly show that a dozen Middle Eastern charities with links to terrorist groups, Hamas and other radical Islamic groups, transferred $32 million to Air Bank during the second Intifada. The money was then allegedly paid out to families of suicide bombers and other Palestinians who engage in acts of terrorism against the Jews. Oh my God. And it says here, according to the evidence presented by the plaintiff today, based on bank documents, families of suicide bombers received $5,300 payment, or about 4 times the average annual Palestinian income at the time of $1,600. If a martyr was wounded but not killed, he received $2,655. If a martyr was arrested or jailed, the family received $1,325. The recipients simply showed up at the Arab Bank branch, presented identification, and received the cash. And who says crime doesn't pay? Yeah, okay. And I bet there's situations like this all over the Middle East. I'm telling you, all over. Oh, boy, this kind of fits the dreary day, the rainy, cloudy day we're having in Crestone, Colorado. This is from cnsnews.com. It says that, get a load of this, 109,637,000 Americans lived in households that received benefits from one or more federally funded means-tested programs. So we're not talking about Social Security. Also known as welfare. As of the fourth quarter of 2012, according to data released Tuesday by the Census Bureau, the Census Bureau has not yet reported on how many were on welfare in 2013 or the first 2 quarters of 2014. You think it's gone up? But 109,631,000 living in households taking federal welfare benefits as of the end of 2012, according to the Census Bureau, equated to 35% of all Americans, which is 309,467,000 people living in the United States at the time. So 35% of our society is on the take, on the government tick. It says when those receiving benefits from non-means tested programs such as Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, and veterans benefits were added to those taking welfare benefits, it turned out that 153,323,000 people were getting federal benefits of some type at the end of 2012. So half the people in the United States are getting something from the federal government. You think that helps the Democratic Party? And it goes on. It breaks it down more and more and more here. I think that's probably about as far as we need to go. It's kind of a wonky article. You might like it, though, if you're a wonky. So the takeaway is 35% of the population in 2012, 2 years ago, were on some sort of welfare. Now, what do you think of this? Everybody's buzzing. Everybody's buzzing about this TV series. It's called Black Jesus. And it's created by some skippy named Aaron McGruger with Gerald Slink Johnson, Charles Q. Murphy, Callie Hawk, Corey Holcomb. A TV series finds Jesus living in the present-day Compton, California, on a daily mission to spread love, kindness throughout the world. And my question is, where's the Black Mohammed? You know, that's what I want to hear. Black Mohammed. You know, that's not going to happen. You know, the thing is, I don't think too many Christians are going to get upset over some overtanned liberal Looney Tune from California doing a movie about a black Jesus. Like, wow, that's so edgy, that's so avant-garde, that's so provocative. Oh, here, we're going to take a little break here. We got some music from Gary McFarlane Quartet, live in 1965, Train Zumba. Take it away, Gary. Maybe. Yeah, it could be. Come on, man. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. From
says, yeah, it sounds good. Gary McFarlane. All right?
Alright, I'm back. This is the Trailer Park Prophet coming at you live. Well, I guess I'm not live. I might be live. Who knows? Anyways, we have one hell of a rainstorm going on here in Crestone, Colorado. Holy mackerel. Like I told you, I just got back from southern Colorado with a load of hay, and my friend took my truck on up to his place, and boy, I wonder if he covered up that hay. Our founding father, one of them anyway, Benjamin Franklin, said, "A nation of well-informed men who have been taught to know and prize their rights, which God has given them, cannot be enslaved. It is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins." I like that. It is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins. It's true. You know, and here's this story again about, no, this is John Brennan. Was that who I was talking about before? It was John Brennan. I think I got to do a small retraction. I got my, no, this is John Brennan with the CIA. Huh, we got a little video here. Oh, that's right. Maybe I got my guys goofed up. Maybe it wasn't Chuck Hagel, the defense secretary, that is rumored to have converted to Islam. I got that wrong. It was actually John Brennan. It says 2 years prior to becoming the CIA director, during his tenure as Homeland Security Advisor in 2011, John Brennan stated emphatically that counterterrorism policies would not be based on a feckless delusion of a Islamic caliphate. And an Islamic caliphate is that they're reconstituting themselves in the Middle East. A caliphate is the desire by some Islamics to control what was controlled by the Ottoman Empire in the 1920s. Most of the Mediterranean, France, Spain, Greece, all of that. That was the Ottoman Empire, which was basically the empire of Islam, at any rate. He said that, in him meaning the CIA director John Brennan, said the Islamic Caliphate, calling the idea absurd last year in the weeks prior to Brennan being sworn in as a CIA director. Former FBI agent John Guandolo made the explosive claim that Brennan converted to Islam while a CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia during the 90s. So still, that'd be a big damn...
Our strategy is also shaped by a deeper understanding of Al-Qaeda's goals, strategy, and tactics that we have gained over the last decade. I'm not talking about Al-Qaeda's grandiose vision of global domination through a violent Islamic caliphate. That vision is absurd, and we are not going to organize our counterterrorism policies against a feckless delusion that is never going to happen.
Never going to happen? Well, there's a lot of people in radical Islam that want to see it happen. And wouldn't you have to guard against the possibility that that notion might become operational? I would think so. I don't know. Now that I think about this, suggesting that our CIA director, John Brennan, converted to Islam is, we need proof. I think that's misinformation. I think the Trailer Park Prophet is spreading misinformation. You know, and this is, this story here is unsettling. These two yahoos were arrested for beating up a 90-year-old World War II veteran. In fact, they beat them to death. These two individuals beat them to death. And this was back in April, and this is just circulating again, but it shows a picture of these two animals in their mugshot, and it's a black girl and a black boy. And I say boy, I mean they're probably in their 20s, but they're smiling, you know, like they're at a bar or something. It is kind of disgusting. It says that this veteran, he suffered head injuries after getting jumped by two teenagers. I guess they're teenagers. They just look 20 years old. Who were suspected to be between the ages of 16 and 19. Oh, and they're described as two black males. One of them looked like a girl to me. And let's see. He's just about ready to go into the lodge to play a game of pool. Oh, I remember this story now. I thought this was a new story, but it's not. Still, it's a bad story. And that's the thing, my God. I mean, I want to see the numbers out there for black on white crime. Oh, and I got kind of into a little debate over the last few days, because I'm looking at this thing with Michael Brown, and we don't know what happened, and evidently they didn't have a dash cam on the cop car, but I wanted to say that to make a point that I most likely will never be killed by a cop myself, and you and most of us out there, because one thing we wouldn't be doing like Michael Brown did would be out stealing cigars. We wouldn't be doing that, and we wouldn't be walking down the center of the street. You know, if Michael Brown wasn't walking in the center of the street, he wouldn't have been contacted by the police officer, Mr. Wilson. So I said that I most likely will never get killed by a cop for the simple reason I always show them respect. Most of them deserve. Plus, I do not want to die, and I'm not stupid. I don't want to have an ugly situation with a cop. I'm not going to get mouthy with them. Oh, yeah, and I remember let's see, yeah, and then my friend Tommy starts in on me. He's a big-time liberal. And he says, well, you're white and live in Crestone, like that's some kind of a crime, and only stand up on Facebook. Oh, really? I stand up against some meth heads on Facebook and in Crestone. And he goes on to say, I don't think you have to worry about the real world carrying about you, whatever that means. And so I wrote back to Tommy. I said, Tommy, I've had the crap knocked out of me on several occasions by Latino cops who hate white kids from the suburbs. You know, I'm not some... God. And my friend says, Daniel, you've really lived. God bless you. I'm sorry, you know, but it's the truth. I've been bounced off a hood of a cop car by some big, huge Hispanic guy. I mean, give me a break. I went to all Mexican schools, Tommy. That's where I learned about racism. Tell me about racism. I should talk more about my life. I mean, I went to all Mexican schools. I got beat up. I got teased. I got ostracized. And it was good practice to live in a creepy little community like Crestone, Colorado, whose body politics is filled with cancer. Let's see. Let's see, do I want to do this story? No. Well, maybe. Let me go into this story. If we have some video of Rush Limbaugh, maybe we'll listen to him. I haven't listened to Rush for a while. I'd like to hear his voice. I like Rush. I'll tell you who I like even more. I think I was telling you this, and that is that I really like Bill Bennett. Bill Bennett in the morning, or something like that. Bill Bennett. Yeah, I know I've told you a little bit about him before, but I like his style. He's got 3 young guys around him, and I think they're good. Check them out. Oh, this guy, you got to listen to this guy. This guy is so right on. I love this guy. And he puts it in the very clear perspective what I was trying to express to you a little bit earlier, that if you don't want to get beat up by a cop, don't be a freaking idiot. It's not that hard not to get beat up by a cop. And I learned a lot by watching this guy. I hope I got this video on, because you just got to listen to this guy. You can tell he knows what the hell he's talking about. He's a cop. He was a cop. And now he's like a consultant to various community groups about how not to get arrested and what your rights are and how to act when you're being questioned by a cop. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is that he said that you don't have to tell cops where you're from, and there's a time when, if you're being questioned by a cop, that you just shut up. You don't say nothing. I think this is the actual video, maybe. This could be something from Ferguson.
So I can reach out, I think, 24/7, but there are no branches. 24/7. It's just I'm a little reluctant to try.
Little banking ad won't kill you.
Feel that in your muscles? Try a new way to bank, where no branches equals great rates.
Alley Bank. No, this isn't what I wanted. I want to see what this is, though.
What's the role of the National Guard here tonight?
They are securing the area up there so we can have our resources here.
This is Ferguson. People are marching.
I am. I think
Captain Ron Johnson.
freedom. We're able to voice our opinion, and so far I am. Together we say, for you, Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot. No justice, no peace. For a fair trial and a proper burial, for your soul to rest in peace.
Why so secretive? And I think the police know that they're in the wrong, and they're just, eventually...
Alright, I don't want to listen to that crap on the street of Ferguson. I want you to listen to... Damn, maybe I don't have the right deal here. I'm a cop. If you don't want to get hurt, don't challenge me. Right. Oh, damn it. Oh, I wish I could find this for you. This guy was so good, basically telling people that you got to tell the guy your name, I guess, a cop, if he's stopped you, but you don't have to tell him where you're from. Alright, I can't find it. We're gonna move on. But basically, be nice to the policeman. Don't do something that's so out of the ordinary that it draws attention to you. I mean, use your freaking brain if you got one. Oh, get a load of this. Oprah Winfrey. This is out in front of a church. It says, be thankful for what you have and you will end up having more. But if you concentrate on what you don't have, you'll never, ever have enough. Huh. My friend Carol Avery says she's a loser. And then I say, well, I think you are let me think here. Brooke. And then he replies back, Carol Avery says, no matter that I'm broke, not well, and as right as I can be with God, her actions, I don't know what he's talking about. Let's see. Maybe we'll check into this. This is from Robert Reich. He says, the late Harvard political scientist Samuel Huntington predicted in a 1993 article in the journal Foreign Affairs that the fundamental source of conflict in the post-Cold War world would be a clash of civilizations between different cultures, especially between Muslims and non-Muslims. Well, he nailed that. He was profoundly wrong. Muslims around the world are overwhelmingly peace-loving, moderate, and responsible. That is total BS. Now that's propaganda. And even that's just total BS. As the beheading of James Foley demonstrates, the radical Islamists who are wreaking havoc in Syria and Iraq, northern Nigeria, and elsewhere are barbarians. Well, yes, they're barbarians because most barbarians are Muslims. What are we witnessing, or what we are witnessing, is a clash of the civilized world with an uncivilized brutality that masks itself as a religious movement. Great point. In fact, its major victims so far have been Muslims. Do not be misled by hate mongers who would have you believe otherwise. Our most effective response is to help strengthen moderate Islam against the forces of global barbarianism. But, I think Robert Reich is wrong. And I can't imagine that women don't understand that living under Islam, you're by design a second-class citizen. Even in the moderate countries, like Saudi Arabia, women do not have the same standing in the eyes of the law, of their theocracy. And remember, these Islamic countries are run by a theocracy, meaning they're run by the religious leaders. Just in the most so-called civilized of Islamic society. I'm thinking Saudi Arabia, I'm thinking of Bahrain, places in Lebanon, even where the Muslims are supposedly moderate, like Robert Reich is trying to suggest here. Women are still second-class citizens. They just are. And they're at the behest of the mullah of the month. Okay, yeah, I told you about before the killing of James Foley that ISIS demanded ransom from the U.S. This is from the New York Times. Alright. Stop global whining. Oh, did you hear this? We're going to have a really, 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 really cold winter. According to the Farmer's Almanac. I got a picture here on my Facebook page in black and white, obviously of the 60s. And this guy is sitting in a chair smiling with two chicks. Actually, he's there sitting by himself, and there's some dude, and then the chick is there with the tight t-shirt, no bra, looks good. But at any rate, the sign reads, acid $1. Acid $1. And I wrote on my Facebook page, I said, goddamn inflation. Because I don't think acid is $1 anymore. People still do it. Oh, here is Bridget Gabriel and she is awesome. And she's talking about how radical Islam has a plan to destroy America and destroy it from within. I like this lady. Her voice kind of gets on your nerves, but I like her.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you very much. So touched and so blessed to be with you tonight. You honor me with your presence. Thank you for taking the time to coming here tonight and filling this beautiful church and just being inspired and being surrounded with love, with energy, with goodness. You know, people ask me all the time, Brigitte, don't you get depressed talking about radical Islam and terrorism and such a downer subject? And I tell them, you know what? Yes, I do. But you know what lifts my spirit up when I am down? Is this energy that I reflect on, and I remember all the places that I go to and I speak to, and the people that I meet across the way, like the wonderful people like you that I'm going to get a chance to shake your hand tonight and be around you and talk with you, and I say, there are great people in this world, there are great people in this country who share my passion for the United States, for its security, for Israel and its protection. So I am delighted to be surrounded with you tonight and share with you my life story, what's happening in our country, and what drives me to travel the nation and also the world to speak about why we all need to stand up and come together and call evil by its name. I hope you will be inspired, you will be empowered, you will be encouraged, you will be enthusiastic to go out and change the world, because it doesn't take many people to change the world. It only takes a dedicated few. So here we are tonight. I'm going to share with you why I am so passionate about the issue of national security. And I'm going to share with you my life story. For those of you who do not know much about me, and this is the first night you hear anything from me. I come from Lebanon. I was born and raised in Lebanon, which used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant, we were multicultural. We prided ourselves on our multiculturalism. We had open border policy. We welcomed everyone to come to our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Arabic world. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Arabic world. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Beirut became Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. In 1965, National Geographic magazine had on its front cover, Lebanon, Eden of the Middle East. Unfortunately, all this began to change as the years went by. See, we got our independence in the early 40s, but by the 60s and 70s, the Christians had become the minority, and the Muslims had become the majority in Lebanon. And as the Islamic population grew in the country became less and less tolerant because they started pushing for more rights that were not compatible with our Judeo-Christian value system that we had created. And that's when the problem started. The problem was contained until the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan in 1970, when Lebanon brought them in because we already had refugee camps. Actually, at that time, Lebanon was the only country in the Middle East to accept the third wave of Palestinians into Lebanon. The majority of them were Muslims. They put their heads together with the Muslims in Lebanon and declared jihad on the Christians. What they wanted to do is create a base from which to fight Israel, kill the Jews, and throw them into the sea. Something they tried to do in Jordan. Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians tried to do in Jordan, but they failed because of the dictatorship of the king. Yet they were able to come to Lebanon, use our open-mindedness, our fairness, our tolerance, our multiculturalism, and our democracy to topple our democracy. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975 when radical Muslims blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded. as they shouted Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And as I laid in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs in both arms, I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? Why did they attack us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I knew since I was a 10-year-old child that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town. This is something so foreign to Christians in America. Because in America, our idea of persecution is, oh, I took my Bible with me to work today and people looked at me funny. That's our idea of persecution. Where I come from, our idea of persecution is they want to walk into this church and start shooting at you and killing you. Just like what they're doing in Iraq right now, just like what they're doing in Egypt right now, just like what they're doing in Syria, just like what they did in Lebanon. Actually, what launched the all-out war in Lebanon was 4 Muslims walked into a church service on a Sunday morning just like this and started shooting at people. That's what started the Lebanese civil war. I ended up leaving the hospital and coming back home. But my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living with my parents underground in an 8x10 bomb shelter without any electricity, any water, and very little food. To get some food, we would crawl out under the bombs, and we would dig out different dandelions and different vegetation and different greenery that grew around our bomb shelter because it was the only greenery we had. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring in a ditch surrounded by snipers trying to shoot at us just to get a drink of water. And before we left our bomb shelter, my mother and I and my father would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead just to get a drink of water. And we would crawl in a ditch to what used to take a 5-minute walk would take us hours to get to the spring, where my mother had to use her stocking on top of the gallon of water to catch all the worms and all the junk and all the dirt and all the rocks so we can drink the water. And this became my existence. We lived in the mountains. In the wintertime, it was so cold. And because we didn't have electricity, the electricity plant and the water plant was in a no man's land. And basically, the Muslims controlled it. So if we would go out to turn it on, they would start shooting at it. And that's how we ended up without electricity or water. So to warm up in the wintertime, living underground, because we live in a climate just like Minnesota, very cold in the winter. My father would walk out of our bomb shelter and break twigs from the trees and bring them into the bomb shelter. And he would pour kerosene or mazout or benzene on them and light them with a fire. And we would huddle around the fire to warm up. And many nights, we had an agreement that whoever woke up first, because many nights would fall asleep around the fire trying to warm up, whoever woke up first would drag the other 2 outside and slap them on their face until they wake up. Because many nights we would pass out because of carbon monoxide poisoning, lighting fire underground with no ventilation in a little bomb shelter. And this became my existence. And we would listen to the radio, and in the beginning of the war we thought, I remember my father would say to me when we went into the bomb shelter and, this little dumpy little place that my dad used for storage, and he would say, oh, it's a temporary thing, it's just a week or 2 weeks, we'll be out, life will be back to normal. Because we would hear, my daddy would tell me, oh, America's going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. America and the churches in America are going to hear what's happening to the Christians in Lebanon, and they're going to come save us. And then they would say, Britain is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. France is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. When they hear what's happening, nobody came and nobody cared. And as we started hearing about the massacres happening in the rest of the country, you see the Palestinians and the Muslims put their heads together and formed Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army. And they started massacring the Christians, taking over Christian cities and towns. They committed massacres that were seldom reported in the Western media because the majority of the Western media was located in West Beirut, the area that Yasser Arafat controlled, and nothing came out of there that Yasser Arafat did not approve of. They would surround Christian cities and towns and walk in and massacre the people. One of the biggest massacres in Lebanon was the city of Damour in the beginning of the war, a Christian city. They would walk into a bomb shelter, They would find a mother and a baby and a father hiding in a bomb shelter. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another one to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk to our churches, urinate and defecate on the altar, and then torch our churches. The last lady that worked for me, I hired her because she was mentally disturbed. I wanted to take care of her and her family. And the reason why she was mentally disturbed is because they walked into her bomb shelter. They tied her son, 16-year-old only son, on her lap, held a knife to her hand and made her slit her own son's throat, then raped her daughters in front of her. These are the stories that went unreported in the Western media. Nobody in the world cared to hear, and nobody in the world understood. And when the leftist Christians, when the Muslims would come to massacring them in these towns, and the leftists would tell them, "You can't massacre us. We marched with you. We represented you in courts. We pushed for your rights. We are on your side." And the Muslims would look at them and say, "You are nothing more than useful idiots. You are no different than the other Christians, infidels." But by the time these people woke up, it was too late. And some of them who fled to come and hide in our town, because it was the only Christian enclave left in South Lebanon, it was too late. We knew what our fate was going to be, because we were surrounded by the Islamic forces trying to slaughter us, because we were on the border with Israel. I come from a little town in southern Lebanon called Marjayoun, the Valley of Springs. If you have ever visited Metula in Israel on the northern border and stood on the border overlooking at Lebanon, my town is across the valley, across the border. We knew what our fate going to be because we heard of the massacres, and we knew our days were numbered. And we knew to our front were the Muslims and the Palestinians who are waiting to slaughter us so they can be at the border with Israel. But we knew that to our back was Israel, the Jews. And we knew that the two enemies, because at that time Israel was considered the enemy of Lebanon. We had no diplomatic relations in the 70s. We knew as Christians, if we go to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the Muslims. So few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. They flagged down an Israeli patrol and said, "Listen, we barely have 48 hours to live. If you don't come help us, we're going to be dead. So you help us, we'll be your buffer zone." It works out for both of us. Israel started coming in the middle of the night and bringing in ammunition and bringing in support and bringing in food for the military and bringing bomb shelters to people. And Israel would take Lebanese Christians, anybody who can fight between the ages 15 and 40, and take them into Israel and train them how to fight.
90 seconds.
Because we learned very early on in the war that you can have all your professional degrees behind you on the wall. Your medical degree, your accounting degree, your law degree, your whatever degree. None of that will do you any good when you are faced with an enemy bent on killing you in the name of Allah. So Israel started to help. And Israel would come in the middle of the night. And this is how we lived for 3 years while no one in the world cared. I remember I was 13 years old. And a friend of ours from the militia, from our Christian militia, stopped by. And he said, "Brigitte, I just want you to know that we heard on the radios today that the Muslim forces are planning a major attack against our town. And if I don't get to see you tomorrow, if we get killed tonight, I just want to wish you a merciful death." And he gave me a big hug and he left. And I remember as a 13-year-old dressing in my Sunday best, in my Easter dress, because I wanted to look pretty when I am dead, knowing that there would be no one to bury me after they slaughter me. And I remember sobbing as my mother combed my long black hair down to my hips and tied a white ribbon in my hair that matched the white flowers in my blue dress. And I cried, begging her, "I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old." And there was nothing my mother could say to me. And we just cried. And I remember sitting in the corner of our bomb shelter and holding each other's hands and praying, my mother, my father, and I. And my father said to me, my father